The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sergio, for that lovely land acknowledgement. I'm Ruth Burns. I'm ED of Ontario Culture Days, and it's wonderful to be here with you tonight as part of our province-wide celebration of arts and culture. Ontario Culture Days began in 2010 with a simple goal: to draw people into the creative process and highlight how arts and culture shape our daily lives. What started as a weekend has now grown into a 3-week festival with more than 1,800 free events taking place in communities across Ontario. Each of these events, like tonight's, open a window into the many stories, perspective, and traditions that define our province. Together, they show how culture connects us, grounds us, and offers new ways of imagining the future. Empire of Wild, the opera, is a remarkable example of that spirit. Rooted in Indigenous storytelling and brought to life here through the magic of opera, this project exemplifies how artists reimagine narratives and invite us to experience them in new forms. It also reflects the strength of collaboration between organizations like the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Public Library, working alongside visionary artists. It's when organizations work in this collaborative spirit that I think we see something really special and unique about the arts and culture sector in Ontario, and something that makes me very proud to be someone who works in this sector. I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to our partners, to the Canadian Opera Company, with special gratitude to Mackenzie and Megan for your leadership, kindness, and enthusiasm in bringing this project forward. To the Toronto Public Library, thank you for welcoming us into this space. Sergio, it's been really lovely to work with you. And Diana and Justine, we've been working with them for years on Ontario Culture Days, and it's really special. So thank you for your extraordinary work. Your dedication has made this collaboration possible. And I'd also like to acknowledge our core supporters: the Government of Ontario, Canada Council for the Arts, the Province of Ontario, and the Ontario Arts Council in the City of Toronto, along with our festival sponsors, OLG, EQ Bank, and Toronto Star, as well as Inniskillen Wines, Domaine La Classe Jourdain, and Via Rail. Now, a shout out also to strong funding for arts funders like the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council. These are important ways for the sector and the arts in Canada to be strong. So thank you here for being tonight and for supporting this remarkable collaboration. I look forward to the conversations and performances ahead and to seeing how this new work continues to grow. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mackenzie Morgan, Director of Community Partnerships and Programs at the Canadian Opera Company.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for coming tonight. As Ruth mentioned, my name is Mackenzie Morgan, and I'm the Director of Community Partnerships and Programs at the COC. This story is such an important part and work here at the COC. We were talking at the back, learning and just discussing about how relationships and how community, these are the ways that we keep community alive and we keep community growing. For me, tonight is really relational. When I think about our three speakers that you will see tonight, they all come from a different area of relation, and personally relation, but also to the COC as well. You know, Ian Cusson, who is an incredible composer, world-renowned, I think, at this point, but came to the COC as a composer in residence, and that was sort of how that relationship began to grow and to build. Justine Woods, who is new to me, but not new to Ian and the Georgian Bay community, as part of that community. Back in June, we had a community consultation about Empire of Wild and about how this story should be brought to life, and not disregarding that. Justine was a part of that conversation, and she's our moderator tonight. a very talented garment maker, designer, and you'll see from the way she's dressed, it's only an honor to have her also be a part of this relationship that we are now weaving and building. And then, of course, the insufferable Emma Pennel, who came to us firstly through one of our other programs, the Summer Intensive. That was the first time that the CPP team and myself was introduced to Emma. And I remember when we were going through the videos and going through the panel, it was just an instant connection, an instant voice. And you will hear tonight, Emma's voice will speak for themselves. So with that, I want to welcome Emma Pennel, Ian Cusson, and Justine Woods to the stage, and have a wonderful evening.
Wonderful.
Hello all.
Hey.
Thanks for coming. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie, for that lovely introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here in conversation with Ian and Emma. And I thought to start off our time together today, it would be great to bring Cherie Demeline into this space through her brilliant words that has informed the creation of this opera. And so I'm going to just start with reading a passage from the beginning of Empire Wild, the book. On these lands, in both the occupied places and those left to grow wild, alongside the community and the dwindling wildlife, there lived another creature. At night, he roamed the roads that connected Archon to the larger town across the bay, where native people were still unwelcome 2 centuries on. His name was spoken in the low tones saved for swear words and prayer. He was the threat from 100 stories told by those old enough to remember the tales. Broke Lent, the Rougarou will come for you. Slept with a married woman, Rougarou will find you. Talked back to your mom in the heat of the moment, don't walk home, Rougarou will snatch you up. Hit a woman under any circumstance, Rougarou will call your family soon. Shot too many deer so your freezer is overflowing but the herd thin? If I were you, I'd stay indoors at night. Rougarou knows by now. He was a dog, a man, a wolf. He was clothed, he was naked in his fur, he wore moccasins to jig. He was whatever made you shiver, but he was always there, standing by the road, whistling to the stars so that they pulsed bright in the navy sky, as close and as distant as ancestors. For girls, he was the creature you kept off the road or made you walk in packs. The old woman never said, "Don't go into town, it's not safe there for us. We go missing, we are hurt." Instead, they leaned in and whispered a warning. "I wouldn't go out on the road tonight. Someone saw the Rougarou just this Wednesday, leaning against the stop sign, sharpening his claws with the jawbone of a child." For boys, he was the worst thing you could ever be. You remember to ask first and follow her lead. You don't want to turn into Rougarou. You'll wake up with blood in your teeth, not knowing, and no way to know what you've done. Long after that bone salt, carried all the way from the Red River, was ground to dust, after the words it was laid down with were not a whisper, and the dialect they were spoken in was rubbed from the original language into common French, the stories of the Rougarou kept the community in its circle behind the line. When the people forgot what they had asked for in the beginning, a place to live and for the community to grow in a good way, he remembered and he returned on padded feet, light as stardust on the newly paved road. And he, that Rougarou, heart full of his own stories but his belly empty, he came home not just to haunt, he also came to hunt.
Thank you for that.
I know, I have shivers already. So Ian and Emma, I would love to start off tonight by learning a little bit more, and if you could share with the audience your first experience with opera. Was it positive? Was it negative? Was it surprising? And how did that influence you being here today and pursuing this art form within your career?
Do you want to start?
I'll start. So I was a precocious little kid, and as a young boy, I discovered that our library in Midland had a basement where you could take CDs out, and I would ride my bicycle down the street and go through this wonderful CD collection, and I found some amazing recordings. One of them was a person who I then developed a crush for, Jessie Norman. For the opera people in the audience, I was very enamored with her. Her singing the 4 last songs of Strauss and Salome, and a recording of Peter Grimes with John Vickers, just kind of special pieces that I thought were intriguing, and I took them home and listened to them, and kind of, it started there, and it never really stopped. I also had a really great music teacher growing up, and I think the value of music education is so critical. And this teacher I took singing lessons from her as a young boy, and before my lesson, she would teach a music history class, and in that class, she would describe these incredible worlds. I remember her talking about Aida, an opera by Verdi, and she'd say, in this act, they're in a crypt, and the ceiling of the crypt would be, have all of these wonderful etchings and drawings, and she brought these stories to life and then would play recordings of them. And I think there was something about the mix of storytelling, the sort of the pageantry of the stage, and the power of music to be a sort of central part of that storytelling that just, I was enamored, and I've never looked back.
That's a beautiful story. Mine, okay, sorry, if I get nervous, I sort of feel like I'm on the Ellen show right now.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a really rural area of Northern Ontario. A lot of you have heard this story multiple times. Some of you have maybe never heard it before, but I grew up in a really rural area, sort of off the grid. So we grew up in the village of South River, and if you've never heard of it, that's okay, like nobody has. And it's sort of the halfway point between North Bay and Huntsville, but I'm Indigenous Mi'kmaq from the Corner Brook Indian Band in Newfoundland, and mixed settler and mixed Mohawk on my mom's side from Bay of Quinte. But I grew up nowhere near any of those places. I grew up in the village of South River, and not even in the village, 1,000 people big, but 45 minutes outside of the village. And it was just pure forest all the time, and the cabin that I grew up in was completely off the grid. We didn't have access to internet or electricity or running water or plumbing or anything like that. And it was a very charming, very sheltered but wonderful way to grow up and be in relationship with nature. We didn't have much for entertainment. We played a lot of cards, a lot of cribbage, as any good Newfoundlander family would. And we also had a battery-powered radio, and every day, my dad's favorite radio station was CBC Radio 1, because he liked to hear people talking and all the podcasts and things and programs that you could hear in the comedy shows. And sometimes we would hear Saturday Night at the Opera, and I thought it was the most boring and dull thing I'd ever heard in my life. And because my imagination became so big back then, I would try to imagine what I thought these shows, these operas were doing, what the people were singing, what people were saying. And I would use whatever the host was, whatever they were saying, to help inform that idea. But I would run around out in the bushes, and try and pretend and act out these operas in my head to try and pass the time. And my grandmother is a country western fiddle player, and she took us all around to all the fall fairs and all the square dances, and she'd make us get up on stage, and she'd make me play fiddle, and I was horrible at it, of course. My brother was awesome at it, of course. And I was just always a singer. I've always been a singer. I've always been meant to sing. It's just who I am. From the time I was a little girl to right now, I've always said I want to be a singer. And here I am doing that. And I sort of discovered opera by accident because I went to college in Sudbury for music, and I thought it was going to be pop, and it for sure was not. So yeah, here I am.
You fell into it.
Yeah.
I love how both of your coming into this art form is really informed by place, one, but also family and relationships with other people around you and how they supported you and helped you understand what it means to have a passion at such a young age and be able to see that through into your adulthood. And I think coming from small towns, and myself included, that is a huge thing. That is a huge thing. And so I'm wondering how the two of you came into relation with this project. How, where, when, what is your roles? A little bit about that.
I'll start. So I read this novel. I mean, many people, I hope you all have read this novel. If you haven't, you need to pick it up. It was incredible because Cherie is from our community. So when I heard of this novel in 2019, I picked it up, and the introduction is part of the introduction is what you read. And I remember getting through these 4 pages and going, holy cow, this is my world. This is what I know.
This is home.
This is home in book form, and absolutely fell in love with the story. As an opera composer, I'm always thinking about ideas that have a lot of dramatic potential, that have, to me, sonic potential. And even reading the work, I'm hearing it sung, or I'm imagining it sung, or being told in a musical form. And that was very, very clear to me. And I had this wonderful relationship with the Canadian Opera Company when I was composer in residence and was able to write some works for them. And again, I think that is a picture to me of long-term relationship building. We knew one another, the organization, folks on the board, folks that were in administration, musicians that had come through, et cetera, and built a kind of trust in a language together and opportunities together. And I proposed the project, and some wonderful, savvy, encouraging folks in the administration saw the same dramatic potential that I felt in this novel, and moved the train along to commission this piece. I have to say, the journey from book to opera is a relatively slow one, in that there are a lot of moving parts. The art form is a very expensive one. It takes a lot of people to put a project like this on stage. I was thinking today, any night that an opera is happening at the Canadian Opera Company, and I don't know the actual number, I was trying to guess how many people are working in that building. With an orchestra of maybe 70, maybe more, 40 people in a chorus, maybe 10 principal singers. You've got costume, hair, makeup, stage crew, ushers. I mean, it's hundreds of people that are being employed in this art form. And it's quite incredible to see the level and the scale of work that can happen. And so we've been working on it since probably now 3 years, from idea to a commission, to looking at the novel and imagining how it could work well on the stage, what elements would be included, what would be compressed, what would be changed, etc., to then writing the text. Cherie is the librettist, the novelist is the librettist, which means she wrote the words of the opera. I didn't do that, which is like a script of a play or a screenplay. Very tight language. You don't have the space to write long sentences because the music adds so much space and really comes in as a part of the storytelling. And now we're at the phase of the music writing, and I'm nearly finished writing the work. I'm within the last 2 weeks or so of finishing writing the opera. And then the journey will continue. After that, we will orchestrate the piece, which is another 5 or 6 months of my life taking what can function on a piano, you'll hear a little bit tonight, and making it playable by an orchestra, and then going into production and building sets and doing costumes and all of that stuff to lead us to the stage eventually. Yeah.
That is so fun, and I'm so excited. So I actually came upon this work through Ian, and I met Ian through our mutual friend Rebecca Cuddy, who's a mezzo. And Rebecca and I met because I did my undergrad at Western University, go Stangs, and yeah, so I went to go see a show that Rebecca was putting on at Western for their Friday at 12:30 concerts. And I did that thing where you stay afterwards because you like really want to talk to the person who just performed because they're so cool. And I introduced myself, and then we ended up having a 2-hour conversation because we just couldn't shut up. Like, we had to talk to each other. And of course, I've been obsessed with Ian's work and Rebecca's work for a really long time. When I went to college for music. I did a bunch of research on Louis Riel, and I did a bunch of research on you, and it was sort of a full circle moment when I got to meet you, because it's like meeting like a pop star for me. It was very intense, and I had read so much about you and Rebecca and sort of being introduced to that world, and Rebecca invited me to come and shadow her because she did a concert at Kerner Hall for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I got to come and see how a professional works and what it's like to show up to a gig and what things you need to do and what things you need to take care of before you get to that moment on the stage. And it was awesome because that was the night that I met you, and we bonded over some crackers that tasted not very good, but yeah, we had a nice little conversation about it. And then I worked up the courage eventually to be like, so if you have any scores that you're dying to hear sung, I would love to sing something. And at the time, I think you mostly wrote for the mezzo-soprano voice. And there wasn't many options. There was, of course, Dodo Mon Tout Petit from Louis Riel, which I love, and I love singing it. But then I think eventually, a couple of months later, I was like, hey, anything else? And you sent me this score, and I started working on it for the vocal showcase at the Glenn Gould School when I went there. So this is a long line of things that I have been in Ian's DMs begging him for for a couple of years.
But then you also became an ensemble studio member at the COC, which is like a hugely prestigious position to have, which you're newly in. Yeah.
Well, yes, for sure. That also happened along the way. Yeah, and so ever since then, I just bump elbows with Ian all the time now. It's sort of surreal. And I feel very lucky.
I do too. I feel lucky.
And yeah, I'm excited to sing whatever he sends me through email and whatever hasn't been sent yet.
I love the relationship you two have built through this process. And, you know, even though there's still such a long road to go ahead, even when we were in the green room, just, you can feel the vibrancy and the energy and the fun and the laughter. And, you know, that's like the epitome of native joy, which I just love to see for all of us. And it's something that we're able to cherish through these moments, and that we'll be able to look back on and also bring into and thread through the entire production. And the fact that that's happening even in these early stages is really incredible to witness and see. I'm wondering, from both of your opinions, how are modern productions such as this project, Empire of Wild, the opera, challenging those traditional molds or forms of opera as something that is a Western art form? How are we challenging that? How are we pushing back against those frameworks?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, opera is a 400-year-old art form. It has this incredible legacy. For those who've attended the opera, you've heard a whole range of styles of work, ways of approaching dramatizing story through music. And it has a lot of baggage with it. It has a lot of expectation sometimes. And I think what I always remember and think back to is that for so much of opera's history, it was a very, very active art form. It was, you could, if you were in a small European city or a larger European city, in the 1700s at some point, or especially the 19th century, you could hear new operas, probably weekly, maybe even daily. That there was a lot of material being created. Composers and librettists and impresarios were experimenting with the art form. It was active. It was central to the culture, and I think it's sometime in the 20th century. A lot of opera has become more like museum pieces in the sense that there is much less of the new creation of opera. And I think just to be part of and having an organization that is commissioning new work is the act of keeping the art form alive and vital and important. And really, to me, when I think of the future, the next 400 years of opera, it's very much about creating works that center voices and stories that haven't yet been explored. To imagine our small little community of Pennetanguishene being put on the Four Seasons stage in Toronto is something I could never imagine, and yet the story has so much weight and gravitas and universal impact in terms of the themes and the ideas and the characters. It's perfect for that kind of a space, and I think also just seeing different kinds of bodies on the stage to say that there are incredibly talented people that maybe haven't had the opportunities historically to occupy big spaces on the stage, and we're seeing incredible artists emerging that will have fantastic careers and will help shape and pivot the art form. I think for it to stay alive, new work needs to be created and new stories need to be told. And it is an art form. I'll say one other thing and then I'll stop talking. But I always describe when I'm talking to younger composers, because I'm always trying to get younger composers, especially young Indigenous composers, to write opera. And they often will say, oh, that's like a stodgy art form. And I'm like, it is not. It is not a stodgy art form. It is vibrant. It's probably one of the most powerful art forms in terms of being able to tell story in an impactful way. And I think it's the marriage of pageantry, of the set and the costumes and the wigs and the live orchestra, and there's something about the power of the sound that happens when you sit in that theater and you feel the vibrations of the players in the pit, the orchestra players, and you hear these superhuman singers who are themselves, through their technique, through their own bodies, they're their own instrument, which is totally fascinating to me, but they are their own amplifiers through their bone structure and how they use their instruments. It is absolutely, it is like nothing else in the world, and there's nothing that you can watch on Netflix or on TV or wherever else that can punch the same way that operatic storytelling can. So this idea of when I'm talking to younger composers and saying, you need to write opera, or you need to consider it, write for the voice, learn to do these things, I always say to them, opera is like an earthenware vessel, right? It is like a clay dish, and the dish is not full. You can put whatever you choose in that dish. You can put whatever story you choose in that dish, but the dish hasn't been fired yet in the kiln either. It's sort of malleable still. You can push the edges of it. It's this incredible vehicle. Yes, it's a Western form, but it is one that can hold any kind of story. And when we think of the form that way, the potential and the possibility of what we could say in this art form is just off the charts. I'll get off my soapbox and let you talk.
Yeah, what was the question again?
How are modern productions, such as this one, pushing forward and challenging the opera mold?
Right. Okay, so first and foremost, theater, and certainly opera, has always been the people's art form. If we think of the history of theater, it's always been for the people. You used to be able to see it, even if you think of the history of Shakespearean plays, all of that, it was for people in communities to come and engage with whatever messages they wanted to send out into the world, oftentimes politically. And what we do isn't really much of a far reach from that. And so, yeah, pushing the boundaries, I mean, yes, we do push the boundaries because for the past however many years, we've sort of lost that tradition. And I think we push the boundaries in the way that we're sort of bringing that tradition back to the people. And Indigenous people, we are the people. We're part of that community. And for so long, we've been forgotten from that community. But, you know, we're here today on this stage in front of people, and that's pretty incredible. Yeah, I've always kind of thought as well, a lot of people always ask me, like, how did you get to opera? And it's sort of like a colonial art form, you know. It's meant for kings and queens and aristocracy and sort of these things that we deem as not accessible to the general public. But what I have always done is been a storyteller, and that's what opera is. It's storytelling. And the first time I ever saw someone sing in an operatic style, it was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen anybody do with their body. And I'd never seen anybody be that open, that free, and that confident. And I have been chasing and will continue to chase that until I'm dead in the ground. So, yeah, I think that's how, because I can.
I love that. I love how you said opera is of the people, it's for the people, it's an art form that starts with us. And I do think that Cherie's book, Empire of Wild, is the perfect example of that. And even before we were speaking about how the story that this book is inspired by belongs to our entire community. It belongs to so many people beyond just the two of us, beyond just Cherie. And I think being able to make those connections between opera as a form of the people and stories that are held within communities and passed from generation to generation, the synergy between those two things is just so profound, and being able to bring those ideas together through this art form is incredible. I'm just feeling very excited about all of this. So I have a little bit of a follow-up question from this is, how do you balance still honoring those traditional ways of doing or practicing or embodying operatic form while thinking about ways that it could be introduced to new audiences or bringing in new voices or new things musically? Do you find there to be a tension within that balance, or do you find that something that excites you and energizes you?
The latter, for sure. And I think one thing that I feel I can bring, not myself, but like I with the community can bring to the operatic art form, is really reconsidering process. There have been various historic processes of not only creating opera, so that would be like my role as a composer, also producing opera. And that's been done very many ways, and it's still done in different ways in the world. But I think one of the things I've learned, I'll reference somebody who has been a huge influence in my life is the theater director and librettist and many things, Yvette Nolan, who talks a lot about process and people-centric work, process before product. In some ways, I'm less concerned about the opera that I'm writing than the way I'm making it. And a couple of the thoughts there, creating a room where there are a multiplicity of voices, and those voices are equal. There's no, she always uses the example of the triangle, and you want to turn the triangle on its side and stretch out the edges, and it becomes a circle. And often we'll sit in circle, and we spend our time not starting right into a project, but actually talking about ourselves and talking about where we're at and what we're bringing into the room. It becomes an incredibly human experience. And what I've found is that when we work those ways and we bring those kind of value systems into our spaces, the quality of the work is exponentially better. The way that people feel in terms of bringing the best of themselves and all of themselves to the work increases. I always use this funny story because often in equity contracts, there's a 6-hour workday, right? And I remember working on a project, and it was with Yvette Nolan at another opera company, and we would take the first hour of that 6-hour day. Now, people are being paid on the 6-hour scale. And we would sit in a circle, and we wouldn't talk at all about the project. We would talk about how our night was. Did we sleep well? It was the most wasteful, from an economic perspective, hour that you could imagine. The quality of work that emerged in the next 5 hours was like 3 days worth of work. It was that we had started from the people in the room and started by, in some ways, clearing out the junk that you bring with you, that you might carry for those 6 hours with you, and getting to the work in a much more exciting way. So those ways of working, I mean, that's hard to quantify when you're like, by the way, could we use an hour of this day to do nothing about this project? You might be like, oh my gosh. But the outcomes that can come from that slight shift, and it is really a slight shift in the way you approach something. Opera making, it is potentially very, very impactful, and so for me, it's bringing process to the making of the work, and I just have to trust in that, knowing from experience and knowing from what I've been taught, that the quality of the output will be reflected in that.
Well, it becomes relational, right? You're spending time with each other, getting to know one another, building a relationship, and how that then it goes to inform the work moving forward. Yeah. It changes everything.
It's like you get to learn, oh, this is how Emma sings, and this is how they like to do this, and oh, I could bring that to my process. But if I was just like, I'll do that, and then I'll hand it to you later, and you'll sing what I wrote, I mean, it also just becomes not as fun.
That's true. Yeah, it's not as fun. I like fun. Yeah, I think some of the ways that I think that it's kind of like I don't really have to bring it in, because I think sometimes it's okay if that work is good enough for just me. And sometimes when you're doing the work for just you, but you do it in front of people, it's enough that it will affect other people in the room as well. And so, I mean, of course, process is part of that. I sort of go into a trance whenever I perform, and I sort of allow myself, this sounds all very spiritual, but I sort of allow myself to become the vessel and allow the story to come in. And I think that, yeah, if I'm just bringing my authentic self to whatever I'm doing, and if I'm just doing that work of loving the music and letting the music love me and showing people that in public, then that can be enough for me, and also more than enough to feed others as well.
I love that. I love that process, truly. And I think it just goes to show the expansiveness of how we can approach these projects that we're doing, and how we can do it from a place of deep relation and also a deep place of care as well, right? Caring for ourselves, but also caring for others who we are working with, and how we are being very intentional of, their wants and needs, and supporting them, but also supporting ourselves and filling our love cup in a way. Filling it up. My next question is a little more directed to you, Ian, and I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of a glimpse into the story. I know we could talk about this for so much longer than we have tonight, but a little bit about the story, and then how it relates to the soundscape that you've wanted to achieve musically, writing the piece.
Well, the story is really centers around this incredible woman named Joan Beausoleil. And she is the heart of the work. She is the core of the work. She is what holds the piece together. And it makes me think, just before I get into the story, is something that Cherie has said a number of times, is the greatest burden that Indigenous women carry is love. And when I think of my mother and my grandmothers and my aunties, and I think of the women who have sustained our communities, and on whose shoulders our cultures exist and stay and are thriving even to this day. So Joan is a construction worker. She fixes houses with the family business. And at the beginning of the opera, or the novel as well, we learn that she's pining for this guy, Victor, her husband, who walked out on her about 11 months before the beginning of the story. And this for her has been really hard. He is the true love of her life. They had this connection that was unlike anything else. And it's completely unlike him to have just walked out after a little argument that they had. And everybody in her family is like, you got to get over this guy. He left you. And she has a night out and is walking through a Walmart parking lot one Sunday afternoon, and she sees this white tent set up in the parking lot, and she hears music coming from it. And she said, what in the world is this? And pulls the flap back from the tent, and there's a church revival service going on in this Walmart parking lot. And at the front, at the altar, is a man that looks shockingly like Victor, her husband, who left 11 months before. And then he speaks, and she immediately recognizes the voice. This is her husband. And she approaches him and says, Victor, what are you doing? You cut your hair. What's going on? You left. Why are you here? Like, you had no interest in religion before or anything like this. And he said, I'm sorry, who are you? And Victor? I don't know a Victor. You must be mistaken. And what we learn as we go through this opera is that, in fact, he is under the power, the spell, the kind of manipulation of Rougarou, this dog-man creature that is unique to our community and is also kind of a community corrective, but also an uncontrollable presence that shifts shape and is malleable and lives almost on the fringes of the world. And we learn that if she cannot get him back from the grips of this Rougarou within a couple days at this point, because the clock is ticking, he will forever be trapped in that form. And so her journey is to learn, how in the world do we get this man back? And we're going to hear in a little bit one of the arias, and an aria is just a song, a moment where the action of the opera that's been moving forward and propelling forward pauses for a moment, where one of the characters often will be reflecting on their experience, and we'll hear her pray and prepare for her first attempt to try to get him back, and she's going to seduce him. Yeah, it's a bit of a thriller as well, because the pacing of this and the intensity and what goes on and what we learn about this church thing that's been gathered, and it's a wild ride. Empire of Wild. It's a wild ride. I don't know if that is. Oh, and then sonically. Oh, yeah, I wanted to say this. One of the things that I've loved to do, because I grew up in Penetanguishene, Midland, LaFontaine, this trifecta of communities on the Georgian Bay, I spent a lot of time in my grandparents' fields. They had these big fields in their backyard, and I spent a lot of time listening. And I've gone back as an adult and listened. I remember one night a couple of years ago, I went back in the middle of winter. It was a terrible storm. I parked out in the concession roads in LaFontaine, and I walked into a field, I don't know whose field it was, and almost got frostbite, and listened to the sound of the wind whipping through the fields. And while my music doesn't it doesn't recreate the natural sound of the world, the feeling, the energy, the intensity of that has really informed the way I approach dramatic writing. And it's in every moment in this piece. The Rougarou sounds, Jones sounds, all of these sound worlds are very much tied to the place that I know.
I think including the land as collaborator through that is such an important part of the process. And I can relate to land as collaborator within my own work, but how you've been able to bring that into the soundscape and understanding what you want to convey musically, and in a sense bring the audience back home. And share with them what we grew up with and what we love and cherish so much about this place, and the ways in which this place has held our community since displacement, and just all of that, and being able to give that experience to those who will witness the opera, I think is just such a beautiful thing.
And you know, there's some fun things that are laced into the music as well. There's a great scene. One character dies, and there's a wake celebrating this character's life, and the wake is jig filled, and there's these like great jig tunes, but they're embedded and elevated, and they fit very much within the operatic framework and language. And that was a lot of fun, was taking things that might be quite simple or ordinary and elevating them and transforming them and allowing them to the space and the width to be played by an orchestra and have chorus singing and have occupy this enormous stage. It's wild to think of bringing that to the stage.
Empire of Wild.
Empire of Wild.
Empire of Wild. This conversation has been so fruitful, and I'm sad that we only have a little bit of time left. So I'm going to ask my final questions, and it's kind of a two-parter. The first is, what do you hope audience will take away from experiencing Empire of Wild, the opera? And the second is, if anybody in this audience has never been to an opera before, what would you tell them to entice them to come?
Do it. Can I go first, and then you go? Okay. What was the first one? It was, sorry.
What do you hope audiences take away from this?
Well, I think one of the things that a non-Indigenous audience might have, and I'll speak to two groups, if we will, generalizations here, but might think, if I were to go to see an opera with Indigenous characters in it, would there be any way to relate to these people? And I think that this piece, and it's really thanks to Cherie's storytelling and the way she's created this incredible tale, there's this universality to the longings of these characters that I think that the fact that they may be culturally different from an attendee's experience, I don't think that there will be a disconnect in the understanding of the language, and the understanding of the world and the experience and the culture. And for an Indigenous audience, I hope that they will come and see themselves reflected, and to see that there is space for our stories on major stages, and that there is value to having them on these big stages. And I hope it will inspire the next generation of creatives to go, I want to design costumes for the opera company, and I want to build sets or work in the pit or conduct an orchestra or write music, If you haven't been to the opera, I think expectations around the opera can be that it's stodgy, that it's old, that it's old-fashioned. It is the most riveting storytelling that you will get. And like I said, there is nothing like being in the audience and feeling, like literally feeling, and you'll feel it when Emma sings, the power of the voice. It is quite the experience. And I think that my favorite way to go to the opera is in a t-shirt and really casual clothes. And I love that we're in a moment where it's like you can wear a tuxedo and a ball gown, and you can also wear a t-shirt and shorts, and all are great. And there is a great kind of democracy that happens in that you'll be sitting beside the person in the tuxedo and you'll be in your shorts and t-shirt, and you are the same, you are equal there, and the story hopefully will hit both of you just as impactfully.
Yeah, you both bought the ticket.
You both bought the ticket. Buy the discount tickets. There's all kinds of opportunities there, too.
Yeah. What do I think? I think that my answer is also sort of twofold, like Ian's. He kind of answered it perfectly, but I'm hoping that, we sort of picture a lot of what we know about Indigenous storytelling to be a lot of rehashing of trauma, which I think that there's a place for that that's really important and meaningful and special, and work that we should all be participating in. But there's also other types of stories that we can tell too, like sci-fi and romance and joy and fun and horror, scary rougarous and things like that. And I think that there is a place to see Indigenous people in all of those kinds of stories, because all of those kinds of stories exist for us. So I'm hoping that non-Indigenous folks will see that, and then I'm hoping that Indigenous folks that come and see the show will see that Indigenous people can do whatever the hell we want on our own land, including be on the big stage of the opera. And that's all I have to say about that.
It's like for the little Emma running in the forest and the little Ian on his bike. That's who I want to come and sit and watch this. And
Exactly. The younger versions of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These crickets robbing music into the corners of this night. My prayer is large as their soul. Pushed into the curves of this night. My prayer is whispered with old words from new days, bursting with into this My prayer is shouting with old medicine, stories of women and the men they lost at night. If I can't bring you home, I'll get you to the road. If I can't bring you home, I'll guide you with this map. This is your home, your home. that star marked in red will be together.